Ready? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call to order the April 24th meeting of the State Allocation Board. Lisa, if you could call the roll, please.
Certainly. Senator Allen. Senator Nguyen. Here. Senator Pan. Assemblymember Nazarian. Assemblymember Chavez. Assemblymember O'Donnell. Here. Juan Morales. Here. Daniel Kim. Here. Cesar Diaz.
Here.
Irina Ortega.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item of business we have is the minutes from the January 25th meeting. Do we have any comments, any corrections to the minutes? Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Moved by Mr. Diaz, second by Mr. O'Donnell. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. That's approved unanimously. Yes, please. I think you can, but
You can vote on it, on the minutes.
yeah. All right, Lisa.
Yes, executive officer statement. We wanted to share with the board 3 items tonight. And part of in the consent agenda, we actually have 17 projects for $63 million, and that's the result of the spring bond sale. And those districts need to submit the party funding, need to submit certifications by July 24th, and so those items will be approved tonight, and so we'll be reaching out to districts as we start getting closer to those deadlines, so we wanted to share that with the board tonight. The second item is to announce that the party funding round certification will be opening up on May 10th, and it will close on June 8th. So any projects that received an unfunded approval prior to those deadlines will be eligible to submit a certification. And then the last item is to share with the board, we had announced back in January that there was a charter round opening, and so we've had a lot of folks interested in some attendance and numerous outreaches. And so that round closes up on June 5th, so we'll be sending out reminders as well for those charters that are interested in the program.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay, any questions on those items? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda.
The consent agendas are ready for your approval.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members on the consent calendar? All right, is there any public comment on any of the items on consent? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe that's unanimous. And we'll move to item 5.
Financials?
Pardon me, hold on. Sorry. Let's actually, you know what, let's hold the roll open on the consent, and we'll call the absent members in case Mr. Nazarian joins us as well. So let's just hold that open. But I don't think there's any objection to the consent items. So status of funds?
Yeah, so on the financials on page 74, we just want to highlight the funds that were released as a result of the party funding apportionments that went out in December. And so we had $1.7 million that was released in January and nothing to report in the months of February and March. So that's on page 74. And as far as the status of funds, on page 76, again, the activity we wanted to highlight for the board in the agendas, all the propositions outside of Proposition 51, we had over $20 million, 20 projects for over $64 million that was approved as part of the unfunded approvals this month. And also, as far as rescissions and closeouts, we actually had $66 million and 35 projects that were either came through or rescinded. And on page 76, we wanted to highlight with the board the emergency repair program projects that were approved as well. We did receive almost $6 million, and that resulted in savings that came back to the program from the emergency repair program. And we actually did provide some apportionments or additional grants to districts for close to $5 million, and that's 54 projects. So with that, I'm done with the report.
Okay. Any questions or comments on those? Welcome, Senator Pan. Any comments? Seeing none, we will move to the item under tab 6, which is an appeal item.
Good evening. Brian LaPasse with OPSC. The Beverly Hills Unified School District has a seismic mitigation repair project they're requesting replacement funds for. Last year, the board saw quite a few projects that had qualified historic buildings where they were doing rehabilitation rather than replacement when they actually qualified for replacement funding. The statutes do not prohibit or don't say that if you qualify for replacement funding, you have to actually replace the building. So the board has been able to have the flexibility to allow folks to, rehabilitate facilities with replacement funds. The board asked staff to create regulations that would allow for these types of projects when there is a qualified historic building to move forward without having to come through an appeal. We brought those regulations and they were approved by the board in October. However, they're not active yet. So this is a textbook project that would fit directly into those regulations. If they were approved, you wouldn't have the appeal before you today. So staff recommending approval of the item as requested, replacement funds for the rehabilitation of the building pursuant to the regulations that are still going through the rulemaking process. And I can answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from board members? Is there any public comments on this item? Okay, I don't think there's any objection to moving this appeal forward. Is there a motion? Motion approved. Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved.
Thank you.
And we will move to item 7. I do have many speaker cards on item 7. If you haven't filled one out, that would be helpful just to keep the comments orderly in the items under tab 7. So if you could grab a speaker card and get your name on the list, that would be helpful. But we will start with a staff presentation on the regulatory agreement proposed under tab 7.
So we are bringing back our item on, and actually grab your attention to tab 7, which is on stamp page 113. So we wanted to highlight, in January we came and presented an overview of the Office of State Audits and Evaluation audit of the program. And we clearly shared with the board that we had some concerns about some of the issues that were being raised in the audit that was performed by the Department of Finance. We also highlighted to the board there is Executive Order SO207 that actually provides a lot of oversight and responsibility to departments and boards that are to ensure that bond funds are spent effectively and efficiently. And with that, we introduced grant agreements as a part of enhancing accountability in this program. So with that, we got board direction at the January meeting to go back and develop grant agreements with corresponding regulations. So on March 24th, staff presented, sent out publicly the draft grant agreement, and we actually held a meeting on March 30th. And we had quite a bit of members of the public that was interested in that meeting, so probably a full house, about 30 to 50 participants. We also had about 900 people that actually watched the webcast, so it was widely, had some interest in that. We also had solicited some feedback from the stakeholders as well. We sent out an email blast and was hoping to get some feedback as far as technical amendments that we could make forward in the grant agreements, and so we had a deadline of April 10th. We did receive some letters, and so with that, we had the ability to make some changes and reflect that in the draft grant agreement. And we also had a sit-down meeting with some folks as well to get some more input on the grant agreement itself, and that was on April 12th. So what staff is proposing today is having the grant agreements apply to projects that are on a true unfunded list. That's the $370 million of projects that have been processed by the board, and also apply it to the acknowledged list. And those are the projects that close to $2.5 billion of projects that we received but haven't been processed by staff. So that's what we're proposing today. And then on page 115, we wanted to clarify really what the grant agreement is doing. It's actually improves oversight and accountability, and we've also felt it address OSA's findings as well. We find it as a useful tool, not only for districts, but it clearly lays out the items that they're required to do for each of the programs. It also provides a very clear guidelines for eligible and ineligible expenditures that really aren't very transparent for some of our program grants. So we definitely think it's a useful tool. It also provides the oversight responsibility for the Office of Public School Construction. It also provides the oversight responsibility of the closeout audits being accompanied for the local audits to be performed once the project is completed. And that correlates with the trailer bill language as well. It also gets in a process of if you are appealing a local audit, then again, that would go through the education audit appeal process. And so we actually have some exhibits associated with that. We think it's a useful tool, and it very clearly outlines what the requirements are for the program. We wanted to highlight the feedback we received on page 116. We did have some letters that did come in from districts and also some stakeholders. And so we wanted to highlight to the board in a very transparent process that this is the feedback we did receive. Notably, yes, some of the concerns were we're changing the program. And what we wanted to address to the board is we actually are putting forward a grant agreement that obviously outlines the existing program as far as the regulations and statute as how it exists today. So there is a slight change in the item that addresses the technology purchases, and so that is a slight deviation from the existing program. Move forward to page 117. So we clearly believe that the grant agreements, as we drafted, it encompasses all the programs that we administer, not only the new construction, modernization, charters, and career tech that would be part of the Proposition 51, but it also outlines for seismic, which is part of the prior bond program, and the facility hardship, which is health and safety projects that we bring forward to the board today. So we believe it's a useful tool, and at this time we are asking the board to adopt the grant agreement in Attachment D, and the corresponding regulations in Attachment E. And also we're asking that we file these, the board adopt the grant agreements and the regulations, and we file this on an emergency basis.
Okay, thank you. Before I open it up to questions from the board members, I do want to take a moment to thank Lisa and Barbara in particular, and the other OPSC staff who worked on this. I think the hours it took to compile all of the code section and regulatory section items into one single document. I think that's the first time that it's been done for the program. The grant agreement is comprehensive. I know that there are concerns about complexity, but the program is quite complex as it exists today. And the document, I think, is probably the clearest effort we've ever seen to try to make sense of it in one place. And so I really do want to thank you for your work. And I know that it took a tremendous amount of time. And I think it's a very high-quality product that you produced. So I do want to acknowledge that. And then I think we'll start with comments or questions from board members, and then we'll take public comment on the item. Go ahead, Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation and your hard work, because I know this was kind of Herculean, and I think the mantra was that we get it done quickly, but also be very thorough and make sure that projects could get up and running. So thank you again. So I have several concerns, and I'll kind of lay them out under our proposal today. I'll just kind of number them off, and they're kind of scattered because it's been a scattered day, so please be patient with me. Under current law, districts are allowed to set up a payment plan when it's found that they've had ineligible expenditures. And that looks like there's some changes with regard to that. Is that accurate? So in other words, if they're found to have ineligible expenditures, this proposal has it coming out of their base allocation. Is that correct?
That's part of the. That accompanies the trailer bill language, yeah. That's
right.
The draft.
So, and that's the other complexity. We're referencing a trailer bill that has not yet passed, but that's down the road here. So, do we really want to do that? What if the local district has some other source of funding, their own bond funding, developer fees, et cetera? Why would we just say, boom, it comes out of your base allocation?
Let me respond to that. Assemblymember O'Donnell, I think that's a legitimate point, and I think it's something that folks are considering. I don't think it's something that was proposed by Lisa or her staff, so I'm not sure that they
Is it in here?
It's in the trailer bill, so that's really.
But this references the trailer bill.
Yeah, certainly the grant agreement is supposed to be a companion document to the trailer bill, but the mechanism for paying back
Which goes first?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Okay, well, why don't
I just don't want
Go
to put
through-
Lisa and her folks on the spot for making that choice when that's
Okay,
in a budget
well,
trailer bill.
who did then? I mean, help me understand. That's where I'm coming from,
It's proposed
too.
as part of the governor's budget in the budget trailer
Okay.
bill. So you can put me on the spot on that question.
Okay,
but,
well, if you want to,
As I said, it is something that has been raised, and
Mm-hmm.
folks are certainly considering what other options. We proposed that as what we thought was the simplest
Mm-hmm.
way to create a mechanism for repayment. If there's a better option, I think that can certainly be discussed as part of the
I
budget.
guess, then what's wrong with the current practice?
Well, I think currently there isn't a practice at all. There is no mechanism today to pay back something that's found because there is in fact no complete financial audit today.
So I guess where I'm coming from is there ought to be other mechanisms, and I think it ought not to come out of just straight out of the base allocation. I know that's swift and efficient.
Sure.
But again, there may be more appropriate places, and I don't think that serves the best needs of our students.
And I think we're open to that.
Point made. And then ultimately, where will those funds go? Would they go back to the state general fund? Would they go back into Prop 98?
I think as it's proposed, it would go back into Prop 98 because it would come out of the allocation
Okay.
to the district and it would go right back into that same fund.
Okay, my understanding was possibly the general fund, the diversion was to the general fund, but you don't believe that to be the case?
I don't believe that's the proposal, but
Okay.
we can certainly
Okay,
have that
so
conversation.
Okay, more to talk about. With regard to expenditures, we've eligible and ineligible. I've heard that maybe an ineligible list might be better to operate from as opposed to having an eligible versus ineligible list, because something might come up in the course of a project that might not be on the list. Kind of a practical consideration.
And we actually have the ability, I mean, if there are items that are not listed in here, I mean, even with the trailer bill language, I mean, there's always an opportunity to come back and have some changes brought forward.
But if we had an ineligible list only, wouldn't that just be a better practice?
Well, I mean, sometimes we also have new changeover in staff, not only at our staff, at our office, but we also have a changeover in staff at districts. And so it's useful to have a comprehensive document that really clearly identifies what's allowable and what's not allowable. So I would expect if I saw, open up a package, if I saw just a list of ineligibles, then I also would want to see what the companion eligible expenditures are.
Okay, understood. Again, I just think the ineligible, from what I'm hearing on the ground, is a more workable practice. Also, let's see, what else? Again, the trailer bill language, which comes first here? I think that's a question we need to contemplate as a body. We're referencing a trailer bill that has not passed in this document. And again, I don't want to wait till July because I know there's things going on. But again, a consideration to take in. And then with regard to the unfunded list, would it apply to the unfunded list or not?
As it is proposed today, it would apply to
would
projects
apply?
on the,
What would the practical impact be of that on the ground?
well, I mean, they would still have to, these are still the same rules and regulations in place as you would have been approved last year, 2 years ago. So, I mean, we are not structurally changing the rules as far as how the program, those allowances are, other than outside of the computer allowances. So I would expect that districts that received a grant moving forward, even those projects were completed, they would still be abiding by the same rules. And so the same rules that we're outlining also in the grant agreement as well.
Well, I hope that we'll hear when some people come up to comment about that. With that, I'll just leave it at that. To me, today, I'm not ready to approve this today. I would say we just bounce this over to May so that we can really get it right. That's where I sit today, so thank you.
Senator Wynn?
I'm new on the board. I'm just trailer bill versus this, which one goes first? What is the normal practice? Shouldn't the trailer bill, because it's put in statute, shouldn't that go first before we go?
Well, the board has ability to adopt regulations and also adopt the grant agreement. And if there's any differences that result as the trailer bill being enacted, then we also have the ability to modify in the future what those changes are.
could the trailer bill add things in there that will be drastic, that could change what we're doing today? I mean, because that's the thing is, I'm just thinking like, why go before the trailer bill? Because my understand, I mean, it's in statute, it's the law, and it's easier just to follow it than having to chase it or to amend and amend and amend.
I think that could happen, Senator Wynn. I think there could be something in the trailer bill that required us to come back and modify the grant agreement. I think the two items are on different tracks because they address different pieces of an accountability program. The trailer bill addresses the audit requirements on the back end. The grants agreement is a regulatory agreement about receiving funds. The attempt was made to make the grant agreement address the program as it is today, which the bond really locked into place in terms of the eligible expenditures. I think what could likely change in the trailer bill is more on the process side rather than what's eligible or not eligible, because I don't think that's something that's part of the trailer bill discussion. But I think it is possible we could approve a grants agreement today. The trailer bill could make a change that would require us to come back and modify it. But approving a grants agreement today is not something that would be difficult to revise it at another meeting. So that's why we felt it made sense. There was a lot of interest from the stakeholder community of getting these items on the agenda as soon as possible. So that's why we have them here today.
What we heard, or at least some of the folks that came and met with us, is that yes, they want this to move fast, but what their concern was that the public hearing and the public information, it was a lot of information, a lot of things that they had to look through, and so they weren't able to get all their input in. And so they just don't want to look, I mean, they want to make sure that we're doing it right. At the end of the day, we want the money out as soon as possible, get these projects going, but that's where the unfunded, the funded, the unidentified, and et cetera, I think they just want to kind of pause. But I mean, hopefully some of the folks, if they're here today, can make those comments, because I just want us to make sure that we're working hand step with the governor's office and getting him to release the funding as soon as possible. But I don't want us to have to come back and do special hearings just so that oops, we forgot this, or oops, they just added this, because I don't want any delay as we're going forward, because I don't want people to have hope. I mean, you tell them we do our regulations, and then we were stopped. That's all. I mean, that's just my comments. But that's the reason why I'm asking the question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Diaz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I also want to thank the staff. I think they put a lot of work into this proposal. I think in the end, it really just focuses on accountability and clarity in the program, in the front end. And I thank the Senator for her comments, because it is about accountability, it is about clarity, trying to make sure that we address all the problems in the front end so we're not seeing many appeals later down the road. Sitting on this board for several years, I've seen how districts can, in fact, look at some things that could be ambiguous. Perhaps they had a different interpretation of different things. And so when they come up with those appeals, I think what the staff has tried to do with this proposal is to actually look at the program that we've heard in many, many times that many of the stakeholders here have been very supportive of. In fact, wearing my other hat, I've sat in different committee hearings where we've seen time and time again, like, look, we like the program, we believe in the program and how it exists. In fact, the voters approved the program and cemented it for this new round of funding sources. So I think to the extent possible that we can address those issues by looking at these grant agreements and knowing what the rules are, provides accountability for the limited resources that the state actually is providing for these projects. So I want to thank you for your hard work on that.
Yeah.
I want to echo the sentiments of the chair and Mr. Diaz. I think the work that Lisa and Barbara and OPSC staff has put together is outstanding. I say this having worked 14 years in local government, and I used to receive a lot of state funding. And the one issue that I really had was, what are the rules for using the funds? I want to know those up front. I don't want to know those at the back end when I'm getting audited. And what you've been able to do is provide this roadmap to be very clear upfront, very transparent. This is what's allowable and this isn't what's allowable. And that's really important this day because there's so much attrition and turnover at the school level, at the county levels, at the state levels. So for all of us to be on the same page is really, really important. So I commend you for putting that together. My understanding of the process is that, at least the intent is, to the extent that we have the grant agreement now, we want to make sure that it reconciles with the trailer bill language. Is that true?
Correct.
Right. So, and to the extent that it doesn't reconcile, you will come back to us and make changes consistent with what the trailer bill says.
That's correct.
Okay, and this process is just to make sure that let's get this out there sooner rather than later so folks know what the rules are up front.
Right, before they receive an award.
Right. And if anything, this is expediting the process of getting the funding out.
It could, yes, definitely. Yeah.
First of all, I want to echo the comments regarding staff and their work. I know firsthand that it is no easy task to put this together. There's a lot of work that has to happen to get these items ready. So thank you guys and thank the rest of the folks at OPSC. Second, I do want to state that the state superintendent has been a strong supporter of the state bond program. And now that the bond program has been approved, we are very anxious in getting the money out to the districts. And having these grant agreements in place will help us get the money out. That being said, there are some questions and concerns that we have. We do share the same comments with Senator O'Donnell regarding the trailer bill language. We believe that capital funds should be an option, but we understand that's going to be discussed during the budget process in terms of paying back ineligible expenditures. There's a couple of other comments that we had that maybe we can clarify. One of them being for projects that are on the acknowledged list and that have been built. And the grant agreements require that those projects be subject to the laws in effect at the time of the agreement. So I just want to clarify that if the school's been built and the agreements are signed 2-3 years later, that will not be problematic to comply with new laws when the district signs it, because it could be a couple of years out. Is that something that districts are going to be subject to in terms of new laws for a school that's already been built?
The intent is for the laws that apply to the project to be the laws that the district followed. So if the law was triggered by a contract date, then the law would tie to that particular contract date. So it's not an attempt to subject a project to any new law that may be coming in the future.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. Another, and this is a suggestion, so remember O'Donnell raised this issue in terms of the ineligible cost. We do have language in regards to the eligible cost, or ineligible cost, I should say, that it is not an exhaustive listing. We don't have that same language for the eligible cost, and that might be a way to include the common types of eligible expenditures, but could we use that same type of language to mention that it's not an exhaustive list? That might be a way to address your comments as a member in terms of having a list of common eligible expenditures, but referencing that it's not an exhaustive list, similar to what we have for the ineligible costs.
If I may, having experience at the local level trying to figure those things out, I think it's always helpful to know upfront what the eligible costs are, and if we keep it open-ended, that creates more uncertainty. And to my understanding is that we've gone ahead and asked our stakeholders, are there any other eligible costs that we haven't identified in here? And the answer to date has been, this is pretty comprehensive.
We received some feedback from our stakeholders, but as far as, I think there were some questions related to items that would normally fall in a career tech project, whether or not there would be allowances for, kitchen appliances. Of course, if it lines up with the culinary type of path, then those items would be eligible. But there'd be other items that obviously wouldn't fit that eligibility component, which could be, supplies and operational items that wouldn't fall within the program grants.
I see. So let me see if I'm phrasing this correctly. So it sounds like you've identified, to your best knowledge, all the allowable or eligible costs. But that said, there may be some that you haven't thought of, in which case you would work with the school district in those items to determine whether they'd be eligible or not.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, do we receive a short list of additional ones?
We didn't actually receive very many comments on specific eligible and ineligible expenditures. There was an ineligible expenditure that we had identified that it was brought to our attention that that wasn't consistent with the program. We did remove that from the ineligible expenditure list. So we only got a few comments on that. If we received additional items in the future, or if we find them as we're going through the other projects that we're currently auditing that we need to add to this list, that is something that we could add in the future to the grant agreement template. But as of right now, the feedback didn't have anything more specific other than that career tech piece and then the items that we did address already.
Just a comment on that. I think it's the unknown that people are concerned about, not the known necessarily. That's where I think the concern comes from, what we don't know in this room today that might come up through the process. But I want to go back to a question Mr. Morales asked, and I think, was it the acknowledged list you spoke to with regard to the grant agreement?
Yes.
Yes. So if the grant agreement is applied to the acknowledged list, you're saying that's not going to create anything cumbersome? Because that is already past practice?
The grant agreement for both the unfunded list and the acknowledged list, with the exception, as Lisa mentioned, of the technology component, it's
the same?
It's the same requirements into one document, trying to make it more clear. And we did ask at a couple of the stakeholder opportunities, what would make it so that a district would not be able to sign this document in the event that the project was already completed? And we heard the technology piece for some folks that had gone forward, and they would need to consider whether they had been considering claiming technology as an eligible expenditure. And then that was actually the main one. Other than that, I didn't hear any specific comments. So the laws that are referenced in this grant agreement, the regulations that are referenced in this grant agreement, they're similar or tied to the certifications that districts have to enter into when they're completing the funding request as well. So we're not seeing that this is going to be a major issue for projects that have already completed or signed contracts, because it's not adding new requirements that they otherwise would not have been doing under the program. Just an example, we did have a certification that was on the form for many, many years that came up, and when we put it into this grant agreement format, we got a question about whether districts were subject to it or not. And that was a surprise, because it was a certification that's been around for a long time. So actually, seeing that in the first week of this document being out was a sign that actually this format might help people see the certifications that they otherwise might not be reading over. But the certifications and the laws did not change. So we think there will be minimal impact to those that have already completed their projects.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments? All right, let's move to public comment. We'll start with Don Ulrich. And please come on up.
Madam Chair?
Yeah. You can sit there or stand, your choice.
Okay, my choice is sit. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the State Allocation Board, thank you for having us today. We appreciate the opportunity to comment. My name is Don Ulrich. I'm the chair of the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, or CASH. And the purpose really today is to comment and make recommendations on, really three items. The upfront agreement. We've talked about audits that is related. The list, if that's appropriate, the acknowledged list and the unfunded list. And then there's some related issues. So I'll try to summarize the CASH positions on these issues in advance and thereafter offer some detailed comments. First of all, I think it's really important to understand, CASH has said this before, and we want to continue to make everybody understand this, that we support the concept of a plainly and clearly written and agreed upon master document to serve as a guide and template for expenditures of state bond funds to be used in decision making. As far as the delay of, funds getting out, we agree that we don't want that to happen, like a couple of our legislators have stated. But we don't want that to happen at the expense of an agreement that we feel adds some complexities to the program and also causes some issues for school districts. We also support the idea and the concept of changing the K-12 audit guide, establishing the goal of district responsibility for auditing the expenditures of state bond funds. However, we do not agree with the approach taken in each matter, as these are not consistent with existing statutes contained in Chapter 12.5 of the Education Code. As for the two lists, the true unfunded and the acknowledged list, CASH opposes, and I think this is important, any prejudice as to the treatment of either list. CASH believes that the projects on each list were submitted according to the existing statute and asks that each project on each list be prepared for a future apportionment as the board has submitted in date order. The district seeking state bond funding from before 2008 through the current date in 2017 have done so relying upon statute and regulation that have remained unchanged and, by the way, have been passed by the voters with Prop 51. Regarding the upfront agreement again, the agreement before CASH intends to be, before the board, intends to be retroactive, as we've talked about, requiring districts to agree to the terms presented for projects that have been built, could be occupied, or under construction. We just find this unreasonable. It is contrary to existing statute and regulation relied upon by school districts that have applied for funding to date. The board approved projects on the unfunded list, and acknowledges should not be subject to new conditions or new rules because there are some changes, as is contemplated in the agreement. The agreement as written creates more complexity within the school facility program rather than simplifying the process, as has been a goal of the administration. All the certifications in the agreement, or at least most of them, have already been made by the district in the application process. So that the agreement, due to size and complexity, really will add to legal costs, legal review costs for our school districts. The school agency, parties to the proposed agreement, and independent auditors who will be responsible for ensuring compliance by schools have been limited in their inclusion in the creation of the agreement. Representatives of the K-12 audit profession have significant concern as to the work they are to perform and their ability to produce the work intended. The auditors have told us that their procedures are significantly different than those used by OPSC auditors. Much more and different work will be needed to be done at the local level for these auditors. It'll be a different process. The K-12 auditors predict that only a few audit items will actually be prepared, a few audit firms, will actually be prepared to do the work. And as far as the lists, both lists, we feel, should be processed to the board in date order on a month-to-month basis, as has been the practice prior to the implementation of the project and funding method, which commenced in May of 2009, during our Great Recession, and the establishment of the practice of biannual funding implemented by the board as it began to apportion, small amount of projects for stalling the complete diminishment of the school bond authority from 2012 through the present date. So the true unfunded list, we really feel you should move that, as you have considered, to the full apportionment immediately in anticipation of a fall bond sale. Regarding the acknowledged list, process to the board immediately for action as an unfunded apportionment so as to be prepared for the bond sale in the spring. If anything would do what some of us have asked for, is get the money out soon and sooner to schools, this item would do that. So kind of a summary of our recommendations. We ask that the board that has been recommended by Senator O'Donnell defer the adoption of the agreement as proposed, and we further ask that the board direct its staff to call together a small yet representative body of school districts and K-12 audit practitioners to engage OPSC and the Department of Finance in the negotiation of a simply and clearly written agreement. If the Department of Finance is interested in directing expenditure decisions made by districts with an emphasis on the avoidance of technology or computer purchases, they could simply compile a master list of unacceptable expenditures, as has been recommended today, and get agreement from CASH and the schools. The DOF and OPSC can then propose that an LEA acknowledge that it is read and agreed not to purchase unacceptable furniture and equipment. CASH will support such a clear and simple agreement if it is prospective and not reactionary. we suggest that the requirement commence for any project for which a contract is signed on or after July 1st, 2017, consistent with the beginning of the state budget. We ask that the board recognize that the voters of California approve Proposition 51 to fund projects according to Education Code Chapter 12.5 and implementing regulations as they existed in January 1st, 2015. We ask that the board also recognize that projects on both lists are there because district governing boards took action to the expenditure of billions of dollars in local funds as required by statute as the local funding share to planned projects, receive DSA approval, and apply for state bond funding that's relying on the school facility program. So we ask that you approve the true funded list to move forward immediately as you've discussed. And again, we ask that you approve the acknowledges to move forward intact in date order to the unfunded category. Again, thank you for your attention to these matters. We know that the discussion will be robust, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment. And we also, I want to add that I appreciate the work we've done with OPSC. You know, the meeting on April 12th was very productive. The OPSC staff, Lisa did a great job leading them to listen, to try to understand what our issues are. We know that if we continue to work together with them in that fashion, we can come to an agreement that meets the conditions we've asked for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call Letty Boggs.
I'll just stand, thank you. I just wanted to mention that in the audit requirements, and I understand part of the audit requirements are in the trailer bill, part are in the lists that are given. It is helpful to have lists of what's ineligible and what's eligible. However, the nature of those kinds of lists is as soon as you begin listing it, people have, well, what about this and what about this? And it becomes very difficult. It's typically easier to work with principles. So one of the principles that we've always applied to the capitalization of school project things are if it's routinely purchased on a supply budget, it doesn't become accounted for in the capitalization of the project. But if it is something that is needed to equip the school for functioning, the first time it is built, the rules are different than strictly supply later. So for instance, the first time you build this room, you could put light fixture in it, but if you were only buying, well, these are expensive, but if you were only buying one school light fixture, it wouldn't meet the threshold. And those are part of the system, but there are a lot of things in the room that are not part of a system that are needed to make the school a going concern that you could walk in first day. And so this has been an area where we've worked with clients for many years, that the first time you purchase it to make the school a going, functioning facility, it is allowable in capitalization. You use those capitalization numbers for insurance purposes. If the building was to burn down, you would need all that stuff in there. You'd have to make it a going concern again, absent what was usually purchased under a supply budget. So for instance, you could buy the copier machine under the capitalization, but you couldn't buy paper because paper is routinely purchased. So I think there could be some principles that might assist us better in defining what's appropriate to put within a capitalization of a project. We just ask to be included in those conversations going forward because the stakeholders deal with this conversation between fiscal and facilities all the time. We get a lot of these calls from our clients.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Darren Waters.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Darren Waters. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for Val Verde Unified School District. First, I'd like to thank Mrs. Silverman and her staff at OPSC for the great dialogue and opportunities we've been provided to provide input. And thank Member O'Donnell and Wynn certainly for some of your comments there. I think you hit it nail right on the head with the ineligible list and the apportionments coming out of, the ineligible expenditures coming out of my apportionments for a district. The optics on that of trying to get my bond dollars into the general fund to backfill that are horrible. I don't know how I go to my COC and tell them I've taken local bond dollars and move those into my general fund to backfill that. So the opportunity to pay that, I think, is right on. A little story, I'm building a high school right now. It's a high priority in our community. I'm having to do it in phases because we haven't had state participation. We're doing it totally locally right now, praying for state participation so we can finish this thing out. Highly inefficient way to do it, but we understand these are the times. I've got we opened it up with 9th and 10th graders this year, and we're bringing in 11th graders next year. The fact that this agreement is going to be retroactive, it's going to be very difficult for me to sign a document when I know there are, and Mrs. Silverman's own words in the staff report as well, a vast majority is the same. But there are nuanced differences, and that's going to really hurt my district. Because computers have been used in the past, and we did buy computers with that, with the anticipation that we would get a match from the state. So now that I've done that, in good faith, because that's the way we've done it in the past program, now back to Member O'Donnell's comment, now on my Prop 98 principal apportionment, I'm going to be hit. I don't even have an opportunity to pay for it out of capital facilities funds. So I really would ask that you take a hard look at the retroactivity of this agreement. It's kind of hard to go back and penalize those of us that have been following the rules as we have always done and have been published and discussed around the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Eric Bakke?
Thank you very much. Eric Bakke with Los Angeles Unified School District. Pleased to be here to present our concerns. We also want to apologize for our late letter that most of you have received this afternoon. One of the requests was to provide specifics about what are some of the concerns we actually see in the agreement, and we provided an annotated document that identifies 20, 30, 40 areas of concern as it relates to conflict with the existing regulations, that relates to conflict with the existing statutes of 12.5 and how that would all apply to the TBL as well as this grant agreement. I want to align some of our comments with Ms. Boggs. I think she hit it on the head for it's one of our biggest issues. We don't know what we don't know. And I think by Section G of the grant agreement, by clarifying or stating specifically what is eligible, we lose sight of what could also be eligible, but we're limited to what's in that list. When the auditors are looking at this, it's intended to be a very clear document so they know what to allow and what not to allow. But if there sometimes comes something that maybe wasn't foreseen, that's going to be a project where a cost is going to be deemed ineligible. I'll give you an example. Savings. The use of savings. Use of savings is limited to what's in G. But what's in G says, for example, sidewalks. The construction of site development for sidewalks is an eligible expenditure, but you're only limited to 2 sides. It specifically says that in the grant agreement. But if I wanted to use savings from another project to apply to pay for my local cost for the other sides, I'm not allowed to do that anymore because we're so specific in what is eligible. So savings would be deemed an ineligible expenditure for the construction of sidewalks in a future project. I don't think that's the intent, but that's what the words in the grant agreement say. There are a lot of these types of scenarios that we're finding that I think we have to hit the pause button. Make sure we're catching these things. I know it's great that we're rushing through because we want to address getting the money out. We don't want to look like we're holding, and we appreciate that. But there are a lot of unforeseen things that we are going to have to deal with, and I'm not sure the mechanisms are in place to deal with those right now. So we would just ask, and if we support Assemblyman O'Donnell's recommendation, to hold this item, look at it a little bit more carefully, understanding I think we still have time. I know that I missed the earlier conversation about the budget trailer bill language and having to go through the legislative process. But I feel like there's still probably another 5 or 6 weeks here before we actually have to take action. And we just ask that that time be used to evaluate the scenarios that do exist for the one I described. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I have other speaker cards, but they're specific to the unfunded and acknowledged list items. So I'll ask if there's any other public comment on the regulatory agreement. Right, seeing none. Pleasure of the board. Do you want to hear the next two items or consider this item?
I just have some questions. Maybe the staff can answer or
Sure.
some of the representatives. Mr. Ulrich mentioned complexity of the agreement. My understanding based on the presentation was all the staff did was aggregate all the requirements that we currently have and put in one package so that it's much more transparent and accessible to new people who may not be familiar with the process. Did you change anything other than what additional things that might you have added that are increasing the complexity of the current process?
Most of the items that we highlighted are included in the grant documentation. The grant agreement was just from the certification, some of the problem areas that we wanted just to highlight for districts to make it more simple as opposed to muddling through a number of different certifications that we do have for the program. So again, it brings clarity as far as how do I access the funds through the fund release? At what time stage do I have my substantial progress check? At what time stage should I be submitting my expenditure report for that final audit closeout? And, what we didn't have before is that, again, the list of eligible and ineligible.
So what I'm hearing is it's not complexity, it may be clarity. You're adding clarity to a process. So if the process is not appropriate or complex, that has nothing to do with the new grant agreement. That has to do with the existing process.
Correct.
Okay. The other question I had, and I agree with Ms. Boggs, that it's really good to have guiding principles that kind of underlie, that are foundational, and then you have more specifics. But I guess my question is, why can't you have both? Like the larger principles along with, and these are how we're applying them in these specific cases, with understanding that if something is not identified clearly as eligible or as ineligible, that could be taken up with OPSC staff. I ask that because in my prior life at the local government level, if I had an issue, I didn't know if it was an allowable expense, I would contact the state. The state would give me an answer. I put a letter to the file, and I make sure that was in my file so that if an auditor came on board, they'd be able to see, hey, I got clearance from the state on this process. So I would think from an auditor standpoint, they would want as much information as possible up front, the guiding principles along with the detail of what is allowable and what's not allowable, and then any kind of documentation about something that is kind of gray.
Yes, in the current program as it exists, if we have any issues or items that districts want to raise as far as it's not really clear, then yes, we'll sit down, we'll meet, we'll discuss those items, and whether or not there's times when we do put things in writing. So that way everyone has a clear trail about, yes, we gave you our opinion on this item, and yes, we made a determination whether or not it's eligible, and then likewise, the district will have a copy of that document.
And do you anticipate that continuing?
Yes, that's part of our outreach and education forum too. Is like you said, we're hoping that we be able to come together with a comprehensive list. But there's also those anomalies, and we'd be happy to sit down when we have those anomalies to have those discussions with districts, and it becomes kind of a reoccurring theme. Then yes, we should be talking about modifying the grant agreement to incorporate with those items that we are missing.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Sorry, Mr. Kimmer, you finished.
I'm finished, thanks.
I will just, where I still sit is I think it's important that we do it right rather than do it now. And I'll take a little blame because I was one of the people saying, hey, let's get on this. And I still think it's good that we're here today and having this conversation because, in my opinion, it can help get us to the promised land. So that's still where I sit. So do we need a motion on this?
We would need a motion to approve the grant agreement. If we are not going to take action on the grant agreement, I'm not certain that we would need a motion. I will say that I would have been comfortable approving the grant agreement today, but it does not appear as though there's enough support to do that. But I will say that if we are not going to move forward with the grant agreement, I could not support moving forward with approving the funding proposals in the next items because I think we've been very clear as an administration that funding the projects goes hand in hand with the accountability program, which is the grant agreement and the trailer bill language. Okay. So if we are going to, if there's a motion to defer action, I would support a motion to defer action on all three items under tab 7. So the grant agreement, the acknowledged list, and the unfunded list.
And
yes.
Madam Chair, can I clarify? If the unfunded list is not approved today, then they are not they would have to be approved in May to be eligible for cash between July and December to be able to participate in parties and funding. I just want to make sure that that's clarified. The board has to take action on the unfunded list before June 10th?
June 6th.
June 6th.
Right.
Can I,
So-
when
June
is our
10th,
next
I
meeting?
apologize. It is June 10th. Sorry.
Do we know when our next scheduled meeting is?
The end of May would be May
May
24th. Yes, Mr. Diaz.
So I too agree with that. I would have a lot of hesitation with moving forward without all this being as part of the package. Given some of the testimony, I think they raised some really excellent points, but I also hear that they're very, very close to clarifying some things, right? I hear that the use of technology is kind of the main driver that we're talking about here. I think with some time, Mr. O'Donnell's concerns, and I think the opponents' could be addressed, but I do think that the main purpose of the grant agreement is to actually be accountable for the existing program. And what I've heard from staff is that they continue to assist districts that have questions. They'll continue to provide as much information in the front end to make sure that if there's a question, that they're also available to address any ambiguities as they do so now. So I would be very comfortable with actually deferring, but also deferring all of the items to the next meeting. So if you need a motion, I would make that motion now.
Okay. There's a motion.
Second.
And a second by Mr. Nazarian. I have public comment cards on the two lists, so I'm going to go ahead and see if those folks would still like to speak on those items. I'll call Mr. Waters. No? Okay, you'll pass? Sure. Corinne Loskett. Okay. And Julie Arthur. She had to leave. And Alan Rising. Also left? Okay. All right. Okay. Any other public comment on the items under tab 7? Okay, seeing none, I think all in favor of the motion to defer action?
To clarify, Madam Chair,
Yes.
bring it back in May for discussion?
I think if...
Action,
yes.
I would think.
Yes.
Action.
Yes.
Okay,
if-
so bring it
if
back in
that-
May for an
if-
action.
Yes, I think we can strive to do that. I will say, if we come back in May, we are still going to have the chicken and egg question on the trailer bill. So I think
Understood.
we should acknowledge that. Okay, all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Lisa Jones, if you could return to the consent calendar. We had 2 members to call, I think.
Yes, Assemblyman Nazarian, how do you vote on the consent calendar?
Aye.
And the minutes?
Aye.
Okay.
And then, did we have Senator
And Senator Nguyen?
on-
Oh, you were here for the minutes on the consent calendar. And, okay, you did. Okay, very good.
And then, Mrs. Silverman, anything else under item 8?
We just have the workload report for
Okay.
the next few months.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll be adjourned.